hey, I'm Vivien, I'm a recruiter. Is now a good time to talk? Just start with that. Don't do a long intro. Nobody wants to listen to that. Be respectful and mindful of that. Respect their time. If they say, yeah, right now I have a couple of minutes, or if they say, you know what, right now is not a good time, can you call me back at a later time? But keep it short and simple. Ask if now is a good time. And if it is, then you can move forward with your script or your usual spiel.
And what are a couple things that you might include in that script?
There's always something about one particular role that you're working on that makes this unique or different than something else. And you want to highlight that during the intro.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenly, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we've got a great Tactical Tuesday ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover things like trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday, like today, for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Some days we open up for Q&A. Listeners can drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on, so send those to us at podcast@loxo.co. And occasionally you'll get a mic drop episode from Matt, where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. All right, today, Tactical Tuesday. Let's talk candidate outreach for a second. So more and more LinkedIn DMs are going unread, unresponded. You have regulations like A2P coming down and making text harder to send. Email is, well, it's email. And so that really leaves us with good old-fashioned telephones. So I'm sure that you hear plenty of things online, cold calling is dead. And to be honest, it far from is. And so today we've got a great tactical conversation ahead of us with Vivien, and we're going to get into when and how to really make the most of your candidate cold calls. So on that note, Vivien, you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Perfect. Okay. So candidate cold calls. What do you think?
I think they're not dead. I think cold calling is alive and well, and it's a numbers game. And so when you're calling, let's say 30 people, and only 10 pick up, and 5 of them say they're not interested, and the other 5, maybe not, good time, not good time, your perception of the numbers and how cold calling is working and whether it is working is obviously going to be affected by your experience of conducting the cold calls. But when you compare like the conversion rate of how your cold calls are going, how many are picking up, and you compare it to how many LinkedIn messages are you sending, how many are actually opening them and responding to them, or how many emails are you sending, most likely these numbers are going to be quite the same. And with recruiting, you're reaching out to a lot of people where you really don't know if they're even open to opportunities, if this is the one that they're looking for. Like, you're just shooting your shot, and if you're shooting your shot, depending on how good or bad you are, you're more likely to score or not. And cold calling is very much the same. It's a numbers game, and you just got to keep chugging on.
So it's a numbers game. And the timing of it also matters. So that's literal timing, day of the week, time of the day. And then there's also the timing of like, what stage do you want to go about making that? So I know, let's talk about the stage part first. Like, what are your thoughts around when you should be cold calling as part of the recruitment process?
I mean, it really depends on your strong suit. So if you are really great on the phone and you don't mind chugging through calls and getting a bunch of no's, which is just part of the cold calling process, start with that, and then whoever you couldn't get a hold of, that way you can mark them and you can reach out to them through other channels. If cold calling is really not your strong suit, it's something that you strongly dislike, you haven't figured out how to make it work for yourself, then put it later towards the process after you've already tried them on LinkedIn, you have tried them on email and all that kind of stuff, and then kind of use cold calling as like a last resort almost, and make it based on that. So know your strengths. Are you better in writing? Are you better like chit-chatting? What's your strong suit? And go from there.
So that makes sense, kind of like, when to approach it that way. And then I call it kind of like, it's not common sense recruiting, but the time of the day itself matters also, because whereas cold calling for biz dev, you want to catch them during work hours, everything else with candidates, obviously, you probably should be mindful of the fact that they're most likely working, and you'll have to be reaching out to them if you want the highest likelihood of a pickup. It's going to be outside of your working hours, but that's when they're most likely to engage. So that would be something. I don't have any anecdotal data. Maybe that's something for us to get into with what we're seeing here at Loxo around like days of the week or anything else. But like from your time as a recruiter, did you notice anything like early mornings, lunchtime, evenings, weekends, like anything that stuck out to you that worked well?
There really wasn't like a common theme that I noticed from cold calling, and it was a little bit different for different roles. So if I needed to reach out to people that have a very hands-on job where they cannot be distracted, during the day I was not going to get a hold of them. Like for example, if I was working on a chemist, they're in the lab. They probably don't even have their phone nearby, and so I had to call them on evenings. I know that one of my coworkers that was mainly working with like C-suite executives, the best time to get a hold of them were Saturday and Sunday. During the week, you could not catch them at all. And so this is where knowing your audience, knowing who you're trying to reach out to is going to be super beneficial. But anytime that it's something more like in office where they might have like some meetings scattered throughout and things like that, you can try at any given point and see what works best. Usually Monday mornings, everybody's busy catching up from the weekend. Friday afternoons is where everybody's like kind of trying to wrap up. So that might be a good time to reach out. Monday mornings are usually busy. And so Monday afternoons, you can usually get like the grumps of like, they came back into like over the weekend, they thought everything was good. They came back in on Monday morning, they opened their like emails or something like that. And they're like, oh, I can't keep doing this. And then they're going to be very receptive to those.
Yeah.
So just honestly keep trying, because it really is the right time and place, but you don't know when that right time and place is for the potential candidate. It has to be the right time
Mm-hmm.
and place for the candidate to be open to that. So I did have a couple of instances where I reached out and candidates have declined. And then a month later or so, they would come back and be like, I don't know if this position is filled already. There's been some changes. I just had a company-wide meeting. They're in a huge lawsuit. They're about to like shut this whole place down. Is this available? I'm interested. And so some people might genuinely be happy, might be loving their job, and then something at economy wise or company wise lawsuit or something like that happens, and all of a sudden they're open to it. So there really is no right time except for just do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's get into the Nike, just do it. Making the call itself, a lot of people talk about, do I go off the cuff? Do I have a script? What are your recommendations there to make the most of this cold call?
So I used to actually write a script, and I didn't write it to like sound like a robot or super scripted. It was mainly if my brain just went blank, I didn't just go, it just, I had something to fall back on.
Yep.
Most of the time I didn't have to, but that gave me a little bit more of like a safety net and like confidence in myself, because I can read from a script worst case scenario. And if I
Hmm.
already have it, then like we're in a good place. And so I do recommend writing it down, having something compelling to open with, and just especially if you're calling during the workday, just like, hey, I'm Vivien, I'm a recruiter, is now a good time to talk? Just start with that. Don't do a long intro. Nobody wants to listen to that. And it might be a really bad time for them. Like they picked up the phone, like be respectful and mindful of that, respect their time. And if they say, yeah, right now I have a couple of minutes, what's up? What do you got? Or if they say, you know what, right now is not a good time, can you call me back at a later time, and you come up with like a good time frame, then obviously respect that as well. But keep it short and simple. Ask if now is a good time. And if it is, then you can move forward with your script or your usual spiel and go from there.
Okay. And what are a couple things that you might include in that script?
So, and this is where it like depended on the role. So there's always something about one particular role that you're working on that makes this unique or different than something else. And you want to highlight that during the intro. So once you get past the point of, yes, right now is a good time to talk, what is this? Then you can say, hey, I have this job. And the really cool thing about this is that is, do you want to hear more about it? Like give them a little bit of like a snippet to pique their interest and keep them engaged, because you don't want to bombard them reciting the whole job description. Essentially, you want to give them snippets to kind of figure out, are they interested in something new? Are they interested in that? Or are they looking into something else? And this is where you want to have a little bit of like a back and forth. So my best advice is take like the must have skills and the couple of like nice to haves from the job description that you got from the hiring manager or from that conversation. And then have like an interactive conversation of like, hey, this is a little bit about the company that I can tell you. This is about the role. So they're looking someone with experience in industry, blah. It looks like you have that. Tell me a little bit more about that. And then have them respond to you. So don't just go through, they're looking for blah, 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 blah. This is what they're offering, but make it a little bit of like a back and forth. And that way you can also take really good notes and answer any questions that they might have throughout it. And it's a more organic kind of conversation and not like an interrogation.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And where I see a lot of opportunity for recruiters is the best biz dev prospecting. You're doing research on the company before you reach out, right? Like, what's their background? What do they do? Who am I talking to? You can do the same thing for candidates, but most often I don't see that happen that much. So like if you do want to pique their interest early on, instead of just leading with, we have San Francisco rates. I know you live in Omaha, Nebraska, like pay might not be the most important thing to them. So you can get your creep on a little bit and go, find them on Facebook, find them on LinkedIn, see if there's anything out there. You might notice they like to travel a lot. Cool. Let's lead with flexible work. It's a remote office. Or you might have something like seeing this person's steadily growing every year, 2 years. So getting some type of promotion for, past 3 years, they've been in the same role. Like maybe promotion is interesting to them. You can do some of that research ahead of time that isn't a crazy amount of time suck, but that's how you're going to know like what should you be leading with to really pique their interest instead of just, like hoping something sticks when you throw it at that wall.
Definitely. And it's super helpful to have a little bit of background information on who you're calling. If you found them on LinkedIn and have their phone number, or if you had their resume in your system, or you found their resume somewhere and got their contact info from like Indeed or something like that, then like share, hey, I found you on Indeed and I really like that you have XYZ experience. Are you still there? Or how was that experience? Or something like that. So that at least you share that you've done your research, because typically what recruiters do is they say, I'm really impressed with your experience there, or love your background there. But then they get on the phone and it's like, well, tell me everything from scratch, because the recruiter essentially is giving away, I have no idea who you are, what you did, and why I even reached out to you. Like nothing about you is
Mm-hmm.
pinging anything. And this is where you want to take that extra 10 seconds to pull up their resume. And this is why I need a script, because as I dialed and I scanned their profile just to kind of be a little bit up to speed and see. And so sometimes they would randomly pick up and I would be caught off guard. And this is where the script saved me so many times.
And so is that, I guess it's like there's kind of two paths from here. You make the call, either they don't answer, it goes to voicemail, or they answer. And there's some interest, but there's also some hesitation. So obviously like objection handling is going to be a big part of it. Let's go down the objection handling path for a second. Like how do you approach those? How do you get ahead of them to set yourself up for a good conversation here?
So it depends on when the objection is happening. So if it's happening right at the beginning when you're introducing yourself as a recruiter, you want to keep track of those objections so that you can start seeing what about your intro is throwing people off. So if you constantly keep on hearing not interested, there's something in an industry going on, or something with that particular candidate pool where they're just not interested in talking to you. And listen to your recordings if you can't. Check in your state if it's legal to record calls without the consent of the second
Good,
party. Just
good
throwing
note.
that out there. And listen to yourself to see, would people want to talk to you? Would they want to listen to you? That's one. And that also goes for voicemail. Number two is keep track of those so that you can talk to others. So if you constantly are getting not interested, see if you can check with someone else. How are they handling the not interested for that niche or something like that, to see what they can do. So those are like the early objections. And then you have like the later objections that happen as you're kind of starting to dive a little bit deeper into the role. Always, always, always keep track of those, because number one, it's really good feedback to provide the client. And number two, this will actually help refine how you start pitching the job to begin with. So if people are saying, this sounds really good, but they keep on saying the compensation isn't quite where it needs to be, and everything else is the same at the current company, it's just the pay is not quite what it needs to be, bring this back to the client, see what can be done about that, but then also change how you lead the conversation, how you started, so that you can get to the bottom of this. Because like we discussed in an earlier podcast episode, pay is pretty important.
Yeah, I would say so. So do you ever, not that I don't think recruiters just, but like, do you ever get not argumentative with objections, but how do you receive those? What's the best way? Do you kind of like brush them off? Do you take them in stride? Do you try to not push back against, like, say like, well, you might not have a ping pong table, but you've got the beanbag chairs. Like, how what do you think when like some of those tougher objections do come up?
You want to acknowledge those at first because
Okay.
you want to make sure that the person feels heard and not just I'm skipping over that objection. So I
Hmm.
would say, you know what, Sam, you're right. We don't have ping pong tables, but guess what? We have bean bags. They're really comfortable. They're really awesome to sit in when you have like your laptop and you just want to get away from your desk. And then just say, hey, do you think you might want to give beanbags a try? And then see where it goes from there, because ultimately, as a recruiter, you're not trying to force someone into accepting a position because that's not going to work out long term. You want to
Hmm.
genuinely figure out what is really important to the candidate, what is really important to the client. Can we find a really good match? And that match is always going to be different depending on what the priorities are of each position. So, and this is where volume kind of comes into place, but just have these conversations, always acknowledge any kind of objection and say, you know what, totally understand that you're not interested in relocating. Let me know what it is that you're looking for and I'll keep an eye out for something. And then kind of pivot the direction into what are they looking for, because that way you can add these notes into your tracking system, into your ATS, and then you can always revisit them and say, hey, one of my coworkers is working on XYZ role. You mentioned you might be interested in that. And this is where you can foster really good relationships. And this pays off dividends.
That I believe. Okay, so that's the live call. So say, they don't answer. You called that C-suite exec who's in a meeting on a Thursday. What are you leaving in that voicemail? How do you approach the voicemail? What's your general recommendations there?
I keep it short. I used to keep it short and sweet. I don't keep it short and sweet anymore. But I always had a script because for some reason voicemails always threw me off because sometimes people would just push that button where you immediately get taken to voicemail and then all of a sudden it just went straight into a beep. And so having a script, keep it short and sweet and to the point and just give them one highlight. So it can be, hey, have this really great opportunity. The perk is X. Let me know if you're interested. Give me a call and do something that will make you stand out. So, for example, if this is a position where you're calling a candidate and they would have to relocate to, let's say, California, you can say, listen, if you're interested in starting your day, catching some good waves, give me a call and leave your number. If it's, let's say, in Nevada, it's like gambling industry related, like at a casino or something like that, you can just say, hey, if you're ready to roll the dice and hit the career jackpot, give me a call. Do something that leaves something memorable there because a lot of really good recruiters are going to be calling. And so if this is a really great candidate, again, odds are recruiters are reaching out to them. You want to give them something that when they are reading that transcript of that voicemail, which is what majority of people do, there's something in there that makes you stand out that is like, well, wait a minute, let me actually listen to this. Let me actually give this person a call back. Let me text them and say, right now I can't, but can you call me in an hour or something like that?
So it's just those little things that are significantly increasing your chance of having a phone conversation, even if it's not like the not right now, I'm not interested, but you've you've become known to them. They remember you. So then, a month down the line, when that lawsuit hits, when something happens, they remembered you from it. Not like, oh man, I need to go find another job. Like, oh yeah, I do remember Vivian left me that voicemail. Like that's the game plan that you're leaving there. So okay, so you leave the voicemail. Are you following up with another call? Are you using other outreach channels to continue on after this? Like, have you found any good 1-2 punches there, so to speak?
What worked really well for me back in the day before A2P came in the US, I immediately sent a text right after. I just literally said, hey, this is Vivien, just left you a voicemail. Let me know when's a good time to talk. And that way they would at least read the transcript of the voicemail. And they would, 9 times out of 10, I would get some kind of text back letting me know, not interested, or can you call me in like an hour? Can you call me tomorrow at 2? Or can you email me more information about this or something like that? So I always found really great success with a follow-up text right after getting
Hmm.
off the phone and leaving that voicemail. Nowadays in the US, that's a little bit trickier. Maybe email, try LinkedIn, but definitely try something to be like, hey, I just left you a voicemail and let me know when's a good time to chat or something like that, and see what happens.
Yeah, because some people it's like can't hop on the phone, but they always can pull their iPhone Droid out, whatever it is that they're using, just like pop in the quick text response, whether that's email, DM,
Yep.
whatever it is. But sometimes it's easier for them to do it that way. So okay, I think we've got a good little playbook here for outreach cold calling. Any other last second like tips, tricks, things that you want to point out or that we left out before we wrap this one up?
I would say leverage your strengths. So depending on what your strong suit is, figure out where to put calling in there. That's number one. And number two, there's always a huge benefit in standing out, doing something a little bit different, like plugging in your personality, whatever your personality is. In my case, I'm a little bit more quirky. I'm a little bit more on the weirder side. I try to keep it professional, but I insert that anywhere that I go just so that when people end up reaching back out to me, it makes sense. Like it's cohesive, because if I brand myself as this like super professional person and then they get on the phone with me and all of a sudden I'm a little bit more less than that, and I'm a little bit more like a jokester, it's going to feel off brand. And that helps kind of build that bond, that trust
Mm-hmm.
that will come in so handy the later you get down the line with that particular process. When it works out with that candidate, it gets to like offer negotiations and kind of telling you things that would be really helpful to know, but might be a little bit more personal, where a solid foundation of trust is required. And so add your personality, sprinkle some fun in there.
I love it. Yeah. No one's ever disappointed by that versus the hi, this is Vivien. Wanted to see if you'd be interested in this role with stealth startup. I can't tell you the pay, I can't tell you the benefits. Like have fun with it. So I love that. Great tip there. So all right, Vivien. Well, as always, I appreciate you coming on to join us for the show to share. I can't even call it a wealth of knowledge anymore. It's like whatever is the next level up past wealth of knowledge, just that how much and how deep you're able to share everything here. It's so great. I hope that plenty of recruiters really do enjoy it as much as I do. So thank you as always for that. And as we then wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you aren't sure of, what episode to listen to next, but you really like this one, we've got a link to a similar one in the show notes, and you can find those in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform. Full video episodes are available. If you have questions, send them to us, podcast@loxo.co. And I think that does it for my final spiel. So until next Tactical Tuesday with Vivien, this was another great one.
Bye,
Talk to y'all
everyone.
soon.